So I was aware that my reading taste has changed a little bit recently, but I wasn't sure quite how much until I started putting together all the stats for this video. Hi everyone, my name's Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is going to be my quarterly stats for the third quarter of 2021. There have been two of these videos previously and I will link them both down below or up there somewhere. You'll be able to find a link somewhere if you want to see how these went previously. But yeah, basically this is just a wrap up of the numbers and statistics for what I have read during the last 3 months. We're coming into the last quarter of the year now, so it's interesting just to see where I'm at and sort of what things have changed in my reading style over the last 3 months. I'm not going to ramble too much more, let's just get into some facts and figures, shall we? So I'm just going to be reading things off my iPad here, so I've got a very strange glow coming on my face. But the first statistic that I have is how many books I read during the last 3 months, and that was a total of 26, which is actually a little bit down on what it has been. So previously for the first quarter of the year I read 34, for the second I read 32, and then for this one it's only been 26. I know the reason why this is down is because I had a really slow start to July. July was not a good reading month for me. You can see in my wrap up from that month that I struggled a lot. I don't think I actually finished a book till halfway through the month. So definitely started off on a bad foot this quarter, but I have picked that up, and actually the month of September is actually one of my most successful reading months of this year. So it's kind of getting back on track. It was just a very slow start, so it put me a little bit behind. In terms of page count, that is obviously also a little bit down. So for this quarter I read 10,982 pages, whereas previously I had been averaging at sort of 13,000 and then 12,000, so it's sort of just keeps going down a little bit. But my average number of pages per book this quarter works out as 422, whereas previously for the year to date I was on 368. So what that says to me is I'm definitely reading bigger books, and I know that that comes up later on in the types of books that I'm reading. They are the types of books that will lend themselves to a higher page count. So even though I am reading less technically, I am also reading more in some ways as well, which is absolutely fine with me because I'm really enjoying these bigger, chunkier books that I'm reading at the minute. So I'm fine with reading a little bit less of them if I'm enjoying them more. Pages per day, this is actually a big goal of mine this year. I'm aiming to keep up reading over 100 pages every single day. It doesn't always mean that I'm actually reading 100 pages every day, it just means on average. So it might be on the weekend I can read 300 pages, but on a weekday I can only read 50. As long as it averages out at 100 per day, that's what I'm aiming for. Before this quarter I was at 137 per day. It's now come down to 131 per day because for this last quarter I was averaging about 119. Again, that is very much due to that slow start in July, because July was the only month I believe where I've had under 100 pages per day as my average for the month. But luckily it didn't sort of bring down the entire average too much, because during August and September, as I mentioned, I read chunkier books, which did mean that my page count per day was also going up. So it seems to be back on track now, and hopefully that'll continue for the rest of the year. In terms of the format of the books I'm reading, there's definitely been a change here as well. So I read 2 ebooks, 10 physical books, and then 14 where there was a mixture of the audiobook and the physical book. I haven't listened to anything exclusively on audiobook, but I have done a lot of sort of following along whilst I was listening, or just sort of swapping and changing, listening to the audiobook on the way into the work and then reading it physically when I get back home. I found that, again, that is to do with the types of books that I'm reading at the minute. I'm going to get into what types of books I'm reading in a minute, but I find that the stories that I'm consuming do work a lot better when I can sort of have that mixed element to it. And also that's what helped me sort of get back into reading after my slow start in July as well, is that if there is a time where I feel like I'm slumping a little bit, if I can put on an audio book alongside the book, it sort of just keeps me invested a little bit more, because so I've got 2 senses covered there. I've got sight and sound, so I can't really get distracted by anything else because I'm concentrating in 2 different ways, which I find works really well for me. I know it doesn't work for everyone, but for me it really does. So now we're going to get on to why the books are so different and why the numbers are changing a little bit, and that is to do with genre and also age range. So for genre, normally I am very much a contemporary reader. A lot of times I'm nearly double in contemporary than I am in anything else, and this time it seems to have changed a fair amount. So for the genres that I've not read very much of at all, I read 2 sci-fis, 2 historical fictions, and 3 mystery thrillers, which is actually quite surprising because I normally don't read any mystery thrillers. But I don't know, I read 3. I'm not going to say I enjoyed them all, because yeah, I think out of all the 3 that I read, I only really enjoyed one of them. So but at least I read them, which is a good thing. I then read 6 contemporary books and 13 fantasy, which is definitely a change. Fantasy is not normally quite double the amount of contemporary, but it's just been what I've been in the mood for recently. And again, that fits into age range as well. So I read 1 middle grade, which is fairly normal. I don't read a lot of middle grade, but I try to read a little bit if I can. I read 0 new adult this quarter, which is again fairly normal. It depends on, because it's a age range that is a bit like in between. Some things are marketed as it, some things aren't. It's a little bit like, I think some of the adult and some of the YA that I read probably could have fit in that category, but they technically didn't. But then for YA I read 9, and for adult I read 16, which again, normally they are actually neck and neck, whereas this time adult definitely a lot higher, and that falls into the fantasy. When I'm reading fantasy, I'm not reaching for YA fantasy, I'm reaching for adult fantasy, and that's very much changed my reading for the quarter. Looking at sort of when things were published, I am still mostly reading newly published books. I read 13 books that were published in 2021, 1 from 2020, 2 from 2019, and then the rest of them are sort of dating back for earlier in the 2000s, and then there's a couple of older ones in here as well. There's one from 95 and there's one from 96, and I'm going to show you everything that I read in a minute, and you can tell exactly which ones are the oldest published ones because it's a classic series. One thing I did find interesting for this quarter when I was looking at it is that I didn't actually reread anything. I'm normally quite a big rereader, so it's nice that I am actually getting through my TBR and reading all new things to me. And also 17 of those books were from series, and then the other 9 were standalones, which is also quite different for me. I'm not normally a massive series reader. A lot of times I like the idea of a standalone where once it's done, it's done. I don't have to sort of commit to reading a full series, but that's also definitely to do with reading more fantasy. In terms of those series though, I completed 2 series and then I started 7, which I watched my last statistics video, and I said then that I didn't really start any new series, which was good because it wasn't sort of adding any more to my list. And then this time I've started 7, but again, that is just to do with me getting into adult fantasy, so it had to be done really. And then the sort of last thing for this quarter is the star ratings. So this has actually been a pretty good quarter for star ratings. I haven't rated anything less than a 3 stars, which is quite unusual. I have said before with my star rating scale, I very, very rarely give anything a 1 star. That is basically a awful book that I probably should have DNF'd. 2 star is a book that I didn't like, and there are generally some major issues with it for me. 3 star is a book that I enjoyed, but won't ever reread, not necessarily a new favourite. 4 star is a very enjoyable book, but can't quite be an all-time favourite. And 5 star is a all-time favourite for me. So I gave 5 books 3 stars, 10 books 4 stars, and then 11 books 5 stars. I will say, I've said this before, some of those 5 stars are probably more like 4.5, but I'd rather round up than round down. But still, that is very good sort of rating wise, and again I have definitely discovered some new all-time favourites, which I will get to in a minute. So what I'm going to do now is just show you a clip of every book that I've read during the last quarter, so you can actually see everything that I'm talking about at the minute. Blackout by Donielle Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Ashley Woodfolk, Angie Thomas and Nicola Yoon. Anywhere the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell. Reputation by Lex Croucher. Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon. Rosaline Palmer Takes a Cake by Alexis Hall. Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart. The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary. Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson. I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. Nevernight by J. Christoph. God's Grave by J. Christoph. Dark Dawn by J. Christoph. The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. Saga Volume 4 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire. Ace of Spades by Farida Ebike Imide. Empire of the Vampire by J. Christoph. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. The Neo Witch by V.E. Schwab. She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. And The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. So that's everything that I read. Just to give you one more update actually on sort of where I'm at for the year. So I've now read 92 books total, which is great because my goal for the year was to, well, my Goodreads goal actually is always to read 52, but my stretch goal was to read 100, and I am very much on track. I only need to read 8 for the rest of the year to get to that. I think last year I read 115, so if I can get to that, that would be really good. But we'll see. I'm pretty much on track to do that though if I carry on reading the rate I have been. So we'll see how that carries on going. And now I just wanted to point out some favourites and also some not so favourites from the last quarter. So normally when I've been doing this, I've sort of picked a favourite and a least favourite from each month, but I realised August in particular was a really good reading month for me and I did not have any least favourites, so I don't want to have to force myself to pick a least favourite when all of them were 4-star or higher. So what I've done instead is I've just picked out my 3 sort of most disappointing reads. I'm going to preface this by saying that if you like these books, great. There is nothing wrong with that. It's just that something about them didn't click personally for me. And then I'm going to give you a few more of my new favourites because there are quite a few that I really, really enjoyed during this quarter. So for least favourites, although for this one I'd actually say it's more of a disappointing read. It's not that I disliked it. It's just that I really like this author's other books and this one I was a little bit disappointed by because it wasn't quite as good. And that was Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon. So Nicola Yoon wrote Everything Everything and The Sun Is Also a Star, which are 2 of my favourite books. And this one I just found it to be a little bit harder to get into, a little bit harder to root for the characters. I felt like it had a slightly magical element to it because it's basically about this girl who ends up gaining this power where when she sees someone kiss she can see like the entire story of their relationship, and it's about her love story with this guy while she's also attending a dance class. And I liked the magical element of it, but it just wasn't really, it's not even that it wasn't explained because I don't mind things not being explained, but it was just sort of very randomly thrown in and not really used to its full potential, I feel. And yeah, I just felt like it was a bit lacking. It's a very short book and I feel like it needed to be fleshed out a little bit more. So not a bad book, but just definitely not what I expect from this author. Next up we have another slightly disappointing read that I gave all of these ones 3 stars that I'm saying at the minute, but this one just wasn't what I wanted it to be, and that was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. So this is actually one of the last books that I read, and this is sort of marketed as kind of like a Mulan type story where it is a girl who is born in sort of historical China and she is in a family where her brother is kind of got this prophecy about him and he's going to live a great life, so her family chooses him. Basically, if they can only afford to feed one child, they'll feed him. And then something happens, all of her family ends up dying, and she takes her brother's place at this monastery to kind of take over his destiny. And it was just, I found it really hard to connect to the characters. The plot was a little bit confusing. A lot of it was thrown at you and not really given much time for you to adjust and figure out what's happening. There were some fantasy elements in here, but they were very, very light, and I felt like they either needed to not be there or to be focused on more, one or the other. I can't quite decide. But yeah, I just didn't connect with the story, and what's annoying is that I had really high hopes for it going into it and then just didn't love it. So again, it's more of a disappointment than anything else. And then the last one to talk about on here is another one that was just a bit disappointing, and that is Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart. So again, a 3-star rating for this one. It wasn't bad, it was just that you were very, very much thrown in with this one. I didn't feel like there was much world building at all, so it was very confusing. And again, just found myself not really caring about the characters too much. It's about these 2 witches who form sort of an alliance to take down the woman in power at the minute, who is one of them's mother and one of them was a prisoner of her. So it's about, yeah, them sort of coming together to help overthrow her. And I can't remember too much more about it because it was so sort of just intense and thrown at you. I didn't really take a lot of it in. So yeah, just there were things that I liked about it, but it's definitely not a series I'm going to carry on with. And the reason why this is probably on here is that, again, it was one that it was one of my more anticipated releases of the year, so it's disappointing that I didn't enjoy it, unfortunately. But now moving on to happier times and the favourite books I've read. Most of these are actually from sort of the last month, maybe just over a month. And the first one being The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This was a 5-star prediction. It was in my 5-star predictions video, and I'm happy to say that it was a 5-star. I really enjoyed this book. It's hard to explain the synopsis because the synopsis makes it sound like it's this big, massive, magical competition, and it's much quieter. It's much more of a character piece, and it's really whimsical and beautifully written. And if you want to see my full thoughts on it, I have got it in a wrap up, obviously. But yes, this is definitely a new favourite, and I'm very glad that I finally got around to reading this after owning it for about 5 years. This is my new copy though. This is my pretty copy. So yeah, very happy that I finally read this one. And then we've got the ones when I spoke about reading a classic series. That classic series happens to be a new favourite, and these are the 2 that I've read so far. I'm currently reading the 3rd, and that is the first 2 books in the Farseer trilogy, first books in the Realm of the Elderling by Robin Hobb. So we've got Assassin's Apprentice and Royal Assassin. So these tell the story of a character called Fitz, who is the bastard son of the Crown Prince, and basically he is left on his father's doorstep one day. His father quickly abdicates the throne, and he then no one really knows what to do with him until the king takes a liking to him and decides that he can be very helpful because he can get close enough to the nobility to sort of interact with them, but also is far enough away that he can do more nefarious things as well, hence why it's called Assassin's Apprentice. But I very, very much enjoyed these books. I didn't think it was something that I would enjoy because wasn't previously a massive fantasy reader, but this is very much a sign of me getting more and more into adult fantasy because this is one of my new all-time favourite series. And like I said, I'm reading the 3rd one in the Farseer trilogy now. I am ready to start Live Ship Traders straight after, so yes, very happy that I picked these ones up. And then last but no means least for my favourite books is actually 2, well technically it's 4 actually, but it's kind of one author in general that I've really started reading. I'd read books by him previously, but it was always his joint work, and now I've read some of his solo stuff, and again it's a book that I've had for a while, or one of them is anyway. I keep seeing it come into shop, but I think you know what I'm talking about anyway. I've talked about these enough in recent videos, so I'm not going to ramble too much today. But Nevernight, the trilogy of Nevernight, I can't hold all 3 plus this beast at once. So Nevernight and Empire the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. This was a book that I had pre-ordered at the beginning of the year. Wasn't entirely sure if I was going to like it because I didn't think it was my sort of thing, but I didn't want to miss out on all the special copies, so I got the Waterstones one. I've also got the Illumicrate one somewhere behind me, and I'm very happy that I have this because I loved this book so much. I had read all of this series in August and I loved this series so much as well, but this one in particular is my favourite. I love it, just everything about it. Again, if you want to know full thoughts, there is a full reading vlog of me reading the Nevernight trilogy, and then there is a wrap up where I talk about Empire the Vampire, and probably a few other videos where I talk about Empire the Vampire as well, because it's definitely my favourite book that I've read in the last quarter. If I'm ranking these in order, the ultimate favourite book of the last quarter is definitely this one. So that is everything with all my statistics. I enjoy looking back at what I've read over like certain time periods. I like being able to compare it. Like I said, I knew my reading taste had changed, but I didn't realise quite how much until I put all this together. So it was really interesting to do. I hope you guys found it interesting as well. Tell me how your reading is going for the year. Are you feeling good going into the last quarter of the year? But yes, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below, and I will see you guys soon with a new video. Bye.